All right. You still see my screen? Awesome. I just took it back to the agenda. That way we know where we started out. So really what I wanted to share, and I know this is a big map, it shows all 12 counties that we have included in the Vanpool program. And this is everything in District 1 pre-Hurricane Ian. There was 37 vans operating and 407 participants. What I really like to do is pause on this slide for a moment because 407 is a lot of participants, and something that we like to talk about is the fact that this averages out to about 11 participants per Vanpool. What we end up finding in the area, especially when you see those clusters in the southwest region, like the Immokalee, Lee County, Collier County area, is that a lot of the work sites have identified vanpooling as a great solution for recruitment and for retention. So they end up actually contributing towards the cost of the vanpool, just like FDOT does with that $500 subsidy. So they want to maximize their bucks. What that means is they're leaning towards those larger vehicles, the 15-passenger cars. A lot of them are running at multiple shifts. And then we also have participants that have, or Vanpools that have about 20, 30 participants, because even the part-timers coordinate with that schedule. Now, a lot of the focus is going to be in that Lee County Collier area, because that's really what was affected from the hurricane. The Lee County Vanpools, we had about 25 of them. And that was made really a bulk of the business for us, which was 269 participants. So you see those work sites that are going to be located on the island, Sanibel, Captiva, and then the actual Vanpools that coordinate. So a lot are leaving from the Lehigh Acres area, Fort Myers, and Cape Coral. So what we did just before the hurricane, we had an annual environmental impact review with FDOT. I really wanted to share this slide because it's made a huge difference so far, right? Launching this program. The commuter miles reduced were 2.4 million, total trips eliminated 312,000. So a lot being recorded, and that CO2 emission reduction, which was 1.8 million. But obviously we're here to learn what happened after the hurricane. So let's get right into it. One of the first phone calls that we ended up getting is, what do we do with the vans? There was a bit of panic, and really I think that the timing was not on our side. A lot of the communication that we had with our coordinators for each Vanpool was primarily done in the Tampa Bay area. There had been some preparation in the South, but it wasn't the way that we were handling it in here because of what the path of the hurricane was expected to be. Needless to say, a couple of days before, when we found out the path had changed, we started getting phone calls really from the work sites, and we started talking to them as well, making those phone calls to secure that they're prioritizing their employees. So our first suggestion to them was, hey, you can use those vehicles to evacuate. We have 15 passenger vehicles, so evacuation purposes was, again, safety number one. We had one of our major accounts, South Seas. They had probably about 13, maybe 14 Vanpools at the time. So a lot going on the island. We wanted to make sure that all 400 employees that they had on site were secured and that they park in a safe area. That was the next suggestion to them. Something that we found later on in making the calls, just to make sure that everyone made it out safely, we were thankful and lucky enough that they secured the vehicles. But the little funny story behind it is a lot of them left their fuel cards behind. And some of those cabinets, along with a lot of paperwork, employees had unfortunately floated away in the ocean. So they said, your cars are good, but we're going to need new fuel cards. But again, thankfully, we were happy to secure the employees. Something else that was a big concern early on was obviously what happened to that Sanibel Bridge crossing over. We were very lucky and thankful to FDOT for getting on it so quickly to make sure that they get the temporary bridge up to have access to get on. Access was a little bit of a different situation, primarily because we wanted to have the emergency vehicles out there, right? The city was focusing on safety again because they didn't know exactly what the island looked like. What we ended up doing, as Michelle mentioned earlier, was that early communication with the city. So the city manager connected with us immediately and said, there is going to be a lot of congestion, a lot of entering, going through that bridge, anywhere from landscape to contractors. Residents obviously want to see what their home looks like. And just all kinds of folks trying to cross over. So we started on implementing a plan to try to figure out how to ease this. The idea was that they had to go to a different site to get a pass, and that would prioritize, right, who's entering first, who's going to get that second, and what the wait time was going to look like just to get over on the other side. So they actually, we were very lucky, they prioritized Vanpool and entry, and this is another reason, was to encourage the use. We got phone calls from the work side saying, you know, what do we do right now? What happens? And we started asking, hey, are you still going on to the site, or is there a cleaning effort in place? Are you guys going to contribute and help with that? And they said yes. So we kind of ended up repurposing the vans, which is something I'm going to touch up on in just a moment. But what this did to us, it allows those Vanpools to get on that priority side of the entering the bridge, so they would get there quicker. And it introduced vanpooling to other employers. So now you've got 15 passenger vehicles crossing over at full capacity, as opposed to another 14 or 28 vehicles crossing over all at once. So this, I am no photographer. That previous picture was also me crossing over. I actually went to meet with quite a few of my accounts last week to see what was happening in Sanibel. There's still tremendous need for transportation to get employees over there as businesses are starting to reopen. So Vanpools post-hurricane, this is actually Sundial Beach Resort. They still have a couple vans with us. So there's 28 vans in District 1 right now. 8 of those vans are going to Lee County. So we lost a few, but we were able to repurpose a lot of them. So they went from housekeeping to cleaning crew, right? Making sure that they're taking care, trying to get things organized so they can get things rolling as quickly as possible. So it wasn't safe for me to get on site at Sundial. I was having some communication with my point of contact, but you can see that that's one of the vans. You have the little Commute sticker on it right there. And again, they're just getting those employees back out there, try to clean, try to get the landscaping situated. And one of the more the recent ones that happened immediately after the hurricane was a connection with a grocery store. That was really new to us.
This is what I sent them.
Paul, let me see, I can do the muting. All right, excuse me, guys. So again, the repurposing was a big push for us to get these vehicles out there. I was mentioning the grocery store. We're not usually going after the smaller grocery stores because we understand that the shift, there's a lot of variations, there's a lot of changes, but the city wanted them to open up. They wanted them to utilize a transportation solution that's not going to congest that island. So we actually were able to connect with Jerry's Produce. If you guys are familiar with the island, it's one of the larger grocery stores out there. We connected with their operations manager. They had a sense of urgency in opening up, and the best way to get their folks over on the other side was rent a 15 passenger Vanpool from us, get them loaded up, even if it was just across from on the other side of the bridge. But it helped them get priority on that fast lane and get there quicker. So they went to that 9 to 5, which was really something new from that grocery store side. So the concerns that really came out of this, we had a lot of displaced employees. So in talking to our employers, there's a lot of sad stories out there because they're not functioning. A lot of them are completely destroyed right now. So they had to let go of hundreds and hundreds of employees. So that means that a lot of them had to get new employment. Some of them went further out than what they were used to. Gosh, Sanibel is already far for for a lot of them, since they were driven from the high cost of housing. But now you've got loss of transportation in there as well. So what we ended up doing, it was shifting gears a little bit and starting to look at this as an opportunity. So we work with a lot of these work sites. We introduced them alternative solutions. We said, hey, you need an immediate one. And the best way to do that is go by vanpooling. So Michelle and her team at FDOT were really a lot of helpful in connecting us with the local transit agencies. We've got some great synergy, great partners out there, and those connections were made to help those in need. Lee Tran really, obviously Lee County was affected tremendously. So they were the number one call right after Collier County came through as well, and they started connecting and naming work sites out there that are actually approaching them and requesting solutions. So the work sites are investing in the program. A lot of them who did not look at it before are actually even agreeing to subsidize the cost. So the displaced employees are still living in hotels or trying to figure out housing situation. So the work site is saying, great, well, we're going to go ahead and cover the cost of the vanpool for you guys. Something else that was added on, obviously the partners looking at hospitals, looking at the botanical gardens out there, where primarily the focus before has always been hospitality. Now we're shifting gears and getting the attention to others who are noticing this as a solution by mirroring other work sites, or the employees that worked at a lot of these sites where they're no longer functioning have utilized the Vanpool program. So they're actually going back to their new work sites and requesting to see if there's a solution in terms of vanpooling. So that's some of the information that I've gathered so far. I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions, any concerns, anything else you guys wanted to discuss.
Oops. Thanks, Arlinda. That was really a great presentation. So if we have some time for questions, if people want to turn their cameras on or raise their hand or ask a question, that would be great.
And then I'll stop on the slide, Julie, just because it has Michelle and I's contact information. So if there's additional questions outside of here, I'm always one that will think of them immediately after I push the end button for the call.
Great. That was a good presentation. I kept wanting it to go on. It's good. Okay, so who has the first question? And again, I know these are the first roundtable we've done, but we want to get everyone comfortable with having a good discussion and asking questions. Oh, that helps. So I can see Ken there. Did you have a question, Ken? Or
yeah, Arlinda, you mentioned that you were working closely with some of the local governments, local officials. Have you approached them as to like potentially investing or at least tracking the number of vanpools going in and out of these barrier islands as kind of a way to provide a resilient transportation system in the event of an emergency?
Yes, a great question, Ken. And it's interesting because as you were asking the question, I thought it was going to go a different way. In talking to the city, we said, how about your employees? You know, what are they doing? How are they getting to work? Because their work site was also affected being on Sanibel Island. I remember meeting with the city manager at a hotel, which was being utilized for all, city work. And so a lot of shifting there. We were actually going to do a mapping analysis to identify some results for their staff, but the local chamber was actually someone that showed interest in even piloting a couple of vans. They're understanding that the work sites that are located in the island, really, this was even pre-Hurricane Ian, have some major recruitment issues, major retention issues. Again, I touched up a little bit on cost of housing, driving a lot of folks away, but yet they still need employees. They still need housekeepers at these gorgeous resorts. So we thought about piloting some vanpools where the chamber might even go ahead and subsidize the cost, just to take a look and see what kind of interest we can gauge in getting them over. And then obviously we do a wonderful job at tracking how many of them are in operation. And what I mentioned with the 400 participants, you'll see a lot of them going back. So it's the same Vanpool, but you'll see it cross over more than once. So I feel like that would be interesting to measure out, because that's still contributing, even though it's just one vehicle. In reality, it's doing more than one trip with other groups of individuals.
Right. And Courtney, did you have a question?
I was just curious, and forgive me if you did touch on this, the identifying the drivers is always kind of the challenge. And I'm just curious, if was that less of a concern because the need was evident amongst the group, or because there was an out-of-pocket expense? Just curious.
For the driver identification, it's always a challenge for us, Courtney, because one of the requirements that Enterprise has is a 5-year license in the US. And majority of what we see, especially in hospitality, tend to be from different cultures, different countries. So there's a bit of a barrier when they say 3-4 year license. What we ended up seeing in these scenarios is people that were driving their vehicle and very comfortable in keeping it and doing so, were almost directed to, hey, if you want to get to work quicker, you could volunteer to be one of the drivers. Not only are you helping with that congestion, you're getting to work and, you know, in this fast lane instead of this other lane, but they're also bringing the rest of the group to the work site. But that's really, in general, one of the biggest concerns that we have is getting driver approval. Does that answer the question, or was there a second part to? Okay. We could probably have asked Michelle like 100 vans out right now if it wasn't for getting actual driver approval. We get a lot of H-2B, which are the visa workers that hospitality utilizes on a 6 to 9 month basis. So Vanpool is a great program to introduce because it's month to month. So they normally have to house them and provide transportation. So again, Vanpooling is a great tool for that, but the biggest challenge is getting someone to volunteer to be the driver to get them back and forth.
So I'm wondering, we have representation from almost all of our commuter assistance programs. And I want to hear from Ben. Are you prepared for this to happen in case it happens in your area? Or maybe Arlinda and Michelle, you want to comment? I mean, how were you prepared for this? Did you have a plan in place?